Three, two, one.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Happy Hour podcast. I'm happy to be here looking at week two. Week two action actually began on Thursday night. So before we dive into the Sunday slate, let's look back at the first game of the Minnesota Vikings. Were not very lucky in week one, suffering through some turnover problems and ending up with a surprising 20-17 home loss to the Buccaneers. The Philadelphia Eagles, meanwhile, got a 25-20 win in New England, largely thanks to the defense helping spot them an early lead. Those two teams met on Thursday night. Both were playoff teams last year. The Eagles were the top seed, and in the Super Bowl, the Vikings had a 13-win season, but they just didn't look good against contending teams, and they got washed out in the wild card round of the playoffs by the seventh-seeded Giants. They're hoping to turn things around. Starting 0-2 is never a good sign, but that is unfortunately what happened to them. They suffered a 34-28 loss. Turnovers, again, a big deal. 4 more turnovers for the Vikings. They also can't get a lot going on the ground, which might be a little bit of a cause for concern, both if you're rostering Alexander Mattison and if you're following the Vikings. The line is beaten up a little bit. Madison still seems to be the guy getting the volume back there, but they are definitely becoming a very pass-heavy team, maybe even more so than last year. Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson all had great nights. Even KJ Osborne caught a touchdown. Kirk Cousins looked good. But Madison struggling a little bit, has had some ball security issues. For me, he's very low-end RB2. If you want to go that way, I'd probably feel better with him in flex range. The Vikings now 0-2, a very grim start, especially since the Lions, who got a great win against the Chiefs on opening night, are home against the Seahawks team that got blown out at home by the Rams last week. I think there's a very good chance the Lions go 2-0. The Packers might end up going 2-0. They're playing the Falcons after getting a win. So the Vikings putting themselves in a big hole early, especially in their division. That'll be interesting to watch. For the Eagles, meanwhile, it was kind of a little bit of a ho-hum game. They dominated on the ground. Week one, Kenneth Gainwell seemed to be the featured back, got all the touches. He got injured, was out for week two. DeAndre Swift just exploded. And we thought he was an explosive player that could potentially be the best value in that backfield. Had well over 100 yards and a touchdown. He has struggled some with injuries in his career, so we will have to wait and see if that is a struggle for him again this year. But I loved what I saw in week two. I think he's earned some more touches. The other thing we really learned from this game, Rashad Penny is decidedly their fourth option, because with Gainwell out, it was DeAndre Swift dominating touches, and they were mixing in Boston Scott until he got injured, and then Penny got a few touches late. But it could very well be a Swift-Gainwell combination if that's what you're looking for in fantasy. Otherwise, the Eagles look fine, off to a 2-0 start. Now they get 10 days of rest before their week 3 game. Actually, I think they're playing Monday night, so they might get 11 days of rest, which not going to be great for whoever they're facing. Well, that'll do it for the Thursday night recap. Now let's look at some of the games of the week for week 2. And it kicks off, as I always do, I will look one in each of the windows here. And for the early window, my game is the Chiefs and the Jags. The Chiefs, as I mentioned, lost 21-20 in the opening week game. The Jaguars were able to get a 31-21 victory over the Colts in week 1. The Jags are at home. Travis Kelce is supposed to be back. Chris Jones as well. Those are all good signs for the Chiefs. They are another team that can't really afford to start 0-2, not just because they have a tough division, although it didn't look like it in week 1, as the Raiders were the only team in the AFC West to get a win. But the AFC landscape in general is tough for the Jaguars. They were a playoff team last year. They want to be a playoff team that could go further this year. Getting a big win at home over a contending team would set them on the right path. I think this is going to be a heck of a matchup. In the late window, there are some interesting late window games, but probably the most interesting is the 1-0 Jets at the 1-0 Dallas Cowboys. Both teams getting their wins in surprising fashion. We'll start with the Cowboys. They were on Sunday Night Football. They just decimated the Giants. They got a 40-0 victory victory. It was turnovers, defensive, and special teams plays that really set the stage. Dak didn't have to do a whole lot. Tony Pollard taking over as the feature back, got a couple of touchdowns, only really ran for 70 yards, 40-0. You'd think the offense just went off, but it was a total team effort. That defense looks pretty incredible. On the flip side, the Aaron Rodgers era for the Jets lasted 4 plays before he got dropped and tore his Achilles tendon. Zach Wilson came in, played well enough to help the New York Jets to get a victory. It was really a great effort on the ground, especially from Breece Hall, who looked nothing short of explosive. They also have a phenomenal defense. They turned over Josh Allen and the Bills 4 times. Dak has struggled with turnovers the last couple of years, so that'll be something to watch. But these are 2 really good defenses and 2 very interesting teams doing battle. Both of them would love to get off to that 2-0 start. I think that is going to be a heck of a game in the late window. Sunday Night Football this week features Tua and the Dolphins, who got that 36-34 win over the Chargers, heading in to battle their division rivals, the New England Patriots. Patriots offense, is a little bit new this year under a new offensive coordinator, and Bill O'Brien have some new weapons. Kendrick Bourne looked really good last week when he kind of burst out. The Patriots started slow on offense, but really started to put some things together. Meanwhile, Tua threw for over 400 yards. Tyreek Hill went for over 200 yards. You suspect the Patriots will put an emphasis on stopping Tyreek, but what was an interesting player to watch for me is tight end Durham Smythe. We wondered what was going to really happen at the tight end position here for the Miami Dolphins after they let Mike Gesicki go. Didn't really address that a lot. He got 7 targets last week, caught 3 for 44. Could he be a part of what they're doing here? Maybe. But I also like Jalen Waddle a lot this week. I think Tyreek will be fine, but there will be a lot of emphasis on him as well. The running game's still a little bit of a mess. Raheem Mostert's there. We may get to see Devin Achane this week. Still no Jeff Wilson. We'll see how much that can be involved for the Patriots. Hunter Henry was actually tight end 1 overall last week. In 2021, he was a top tight end option, really had great chemistry with Mac Jones. I thought they were going to go back to using a tight end in a feature role. I had thought it was going to be Mike Gesicki. It looks like it is still Hunter Henry. I like him as a tight end 1 this week. Receivers, was Kendrick Bourne a 1-week thing? Will it continue? I want to see a little bit more, but I definitely think in deeper leagues he is a flex consideration. On to Monday night. There are actually 2 games on Monday night. The first game is the Saints at the Panthers, which starts at 7:15 Eastern, but in the normal window at 8:15 Eastern, we get the Cleveland Browns at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think that's the better of the 2 Monday night games. Nick Chubb looked great. Didn't have to work that hard as the Browns smothered the Bengals in week 1. Meanwhile, the Steelers offense, a little bit of a mess. They got blown out at home by the San Francisco 49ers in week 1. Now they're going to be without Deontay Johnson, which deals Kenny Pickett in that passing game a little bit of a blow. I am a little bit higher on George Pickens this week because I think he's probably going to be their best and most dominant receiver. But we saw Allen Robinson catch a few passes, Calvin Austin, catching a few passes as well. So they could be involved. Pat Freiermuth left that game with injury, but is expected to play. The Steelers are at home again. They really can afford to go 0-2, especially at home. But I think this Browns team is pretty tough. I expect a heavy dose of Nick Chubb. Watson looked okay at times last week. I love the way they got Elijah Moore involved. I think Moore and David Njoku will be even more of a focus this week as Amari Cooper came up late on the injury report on Saturday with a groin injury. If you have him in your fantasy lineup, I would probably pull him or have some kind of alternative option. It's looking dicey about him potentially playing on Monday night. I know I sadly had to go make some of those moves as well. Despite that, I like Cleveland this week, and I think this is going to be kind of a fun game. So that is a look at the games of the week. The week 2 slate looking strong. We have some good matchups, multiple intriguing matchups in both of the day part windows, and then some interesting night games. Well, I've mentioned a few fantasy news and notes, but now it's time to get to the sit start section. So last week for sit start, I did okay. I was 1-3 with my start suggestions and 3-1 with my sit suggestions. Hopefully this week we'll do better. DJ Moore did not have a great connection. Dak Cowboys. They destroyed the Giants, but Dak didn't really have to throw anything. So some of those that didn't quite land the way that I was hoping for them to land. Among the sit suggestions, the one that really broke big was in the receiving section. I just got the receivers backwards because Michael Pittman was totally fine with Anthony Richardson. The Colts have actually a better probably passing game than I think I was suspecting that they were going to have. I thought there'd be some growth with the young player, but as somebody who grabbed him in a couple places, believe me, I could not be more excited. Surprisingly, my start suggestion of J.K. Dobbins, that did hit. He did finish just inside the top 24 despite tearing his Achilles. He is now out for the year. This week, I'm going back to the well, so we'll start off looking at the quarterback position, and my start this week is Jared Goff. Last week, I was a little more cautious, and even though Goff looked good in that opening game, didn't have any turnovers, we've seen his home road splits the year have been pretty dramatic. He was a solid QB2 in week 1, but I think he'll go higher and be in the QB1 range this week against the Seahawks. The Seahawks basically got decimated by the Rams at home last week, and Matthew Stafford threw all over the Seahawks secondary, and that was with a combination of Tutu Atwell and Puka Nacua. I like the chances with Sam Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jahmyr Gibbs. Goff was much better at home in 2022 than he was on the road. I think we'll see him take off again this week. Remember, he finished as QB10 overall last year, so he is definitely in that low-end QB1 consideration even for season long. My sit this week is Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy G had a strong week 1. He finished as QB 12. That was a combination of it not being a great week for QBs and a really strong 2-touchdown day, but his favorite target on that day was Jacoby Myers, who is out this week for the Raiders. So I think they may lean a little bit more into the run game. The Raiders are also on the road against an angry Bills team. Jimmy G might be a better passer than Zach Wilson, but I don't really see him cracking the top 12 this week. We didn't see Zach Wilson have a ton of success, even though he had great weapons in Garrett Wilson and Alan Lazard and some of the other passing game weapons. I think Devontae Adams will be fine. Jimmy G probably a solid QB2, but I'm just not really willing to ride with him in the quarterback 1 range. Now on to running backs. And, the biggest surprise, probably one of the biggest surprises, was the way the Falcons deployed their running game. I had thought maybe this would be a good game and start of a breakout season for Kyle Pitts, but, it turns out passing wasn't a big part of what the Falcons were doing, but they ran all over the field. We knew Bijan Robinson would be there, and Bijan Robinson finished as running back 7 last week, but who had more carries and more rushing touchdowns? That was his backfield mate, Tyler Algier, who finished as running back 4 last week. I think they're both going to be involved. They have a fun game against a young Green Bay Packers team today. They are once again at home. I like the Falcons still with the potential to make the playoffs. They have a little bit of an improvement on defense. I think they want to run, and they have these 2 incredible weapons in the backfield. Bijan Robinson is still great. He's still going to be heavily involved, but don't sleep on Tyler Algier. I think they both have the potential to be top 24 options going forward, and that's why I am starting Tyler Algier. My sit at running back is Dalvin Cook of the Jets. Sure, he was the starter in week 1. He got more snaps, he got more carries, but he also got outplayed by Breece Hall. And I think they were easing Hall back in, coming off of injury, trying to get him going. But Hall looks like he's ready to run. And I think he's going to continue to take over a bigger share of the workload. I think this is more of a split, and I like Hall as the more explosive back. But the Jets are also on the road this week in Dallas, and it's a very tough defense. They kind of bottled up the Giants last week. So I am not bullish on Dalvin Cook finishing in the top 24. That leads us into the next, which is pass catchers. And one of the big pass catching performances of week 1 had to have been Calvin Ridley. After almost 2 years off, there was some concern about what he would look like coming out into a full-time starting role again. He got 11 targets, caught 8 passes for 101 yards and a touchdown. I think all those concerns about him having missed time have kind of gone out the window. He finished as wide receiver 6 in week 1. The Jaguars are playing the Chiefs at home on Sunday, and it should be another big game. The Chiefs allowed Amon-Ra St. Brown to finish as wide receiver 11 on their performance on opening night. And, I think Ridley continues to be a focal point of this passing game. I think he is the alpha receiver that they've been missing. And I think he will continue to put up good numbers. Maybe he doesn't finish quite in the wide receiver 1 category this week, depending on how it goes, but I think he's definitely a lock for top 24. On the flip side, I am not as bullish on rookie breakout Puka Nacua. He had an incredible week 1, finished as wide receiver 9, but late this week he came up on the injury list with an oblique injury. He may not even play, so that is something to watch. He was definitely a very trendy pickup. A lot of people hoping to put him in there. But throw that into the fact that they're playing the 49ers this week, and I don't think that they are going to have quite the same ease of offense that they did the week before. So Puka Nacua, if he plays, he could be involved. He could put up flex range territory, but I am not sold on him being a top 24 finish against a tough San Francisco 49ers team and coming and dealing with that injury. Next up, we're going to look at tight ends. I mentioned this a little bit at the top of the show, but my start of the week is Hunter Henry. I thought Mike Gesicki would be a good fantasy play because the Patriots would feature the tight end. The logic turned out to be right. I was just wrong about the player. Hunter Henry finished as tight end 1 overall in week 1. He won't be tight end 1 overall again probably this week, and you don't want to chase points. But I think the Patriots have been looking for solid targets, and we've seen that chemistry between Mac Jones and Hunter Henry before. It played into a lot in Mac's rookie year, and I think we're going to see it again. I think we'll keep seeing it this season. On the flip side, my sit of the week is Zach Ertz of the Arizona Cardinals. And you're probably wondering, hey, didn't he finish well? Yeah, he finished as tight end 12 last week. He saw 10 targets and caught 6 passes. That all sounds like great production. He only had 21 total yards. It was a lot of dinks and dunks. I think the Cardinals offense remains a little bit of a curious mess. And it wasn't a great week for tight ends. We had a couple of big marquee tight ends like Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews were out last week. I think those guys are both tracking to play this week. We might have a little bit better performances. And I just don't know that we're going to see high-end yardage and scoring totals from anyone in this Arizona Cardinals offense. So against a hungry Giants team, Ertz did not make my start list. I think he'll finish outside the top 12. So I have him as a sit. Well, that's a lot of the look here of what I wanted to do for week 2. Gave you some games of the week. We looked at Thursday night and a couple of sit start options. Before I get out of here, I thought I would touch on a few things that are playing now in theaters or streaming at home as part of the Movie Corner. The big new theatrical release this week was A Haunting in Venice, which is the 3rd film featuring Kenneth Branagh as famed Agatha Christie character Hercule Poirot. If you watched Popcorn People podcast last week, you heard Ricky and Dom talking about their take on it. Eric and I will be giving our full review tonight, but suffice to say, I think we liked it a little bit more than them. If you enjoyed Murder on the Orient Express, Death on the Nile, and you like those kind of murder mystery films, I think this one will work for you. It's got a nice cast. Kelly Riley's in it. Michelle Yeoh is in it. Tina Fey has kind of a fun part. Jamie Dornan, and of course, Branagh. I kind of enjoy him in that role of Hercule Poirot, so that is one to check out. I also managed to see The Equalizer 3, which was one of the bigger releases from the early part of September. I actually liked this one a little bit more than some of the other ones. Kind of a different take on the character of Robert McCall, played by Denzel Washington. I liked his interactions with Dakota Fanning and with the town. But basically, you know what you're getting here. This is going to be kind of a slow pace, but when the violence comes, it is very, very violent. He's good at what he does. Probably they're saying this could be the last one. I thought it worked for what it is. And if that's the kind of movie you're looking for, that is an option. Netflix actually released a couple of different movies this week. There's the kind of vampire satire El Conde. It's shot all in black and white. It has some very interesting stylistic elements. There were some things I liked about it, but overall for me, it was not quite to my taste. Pablo Larraín, the director there, if you like those kind of style and that kind of film, that might speak to you a little bit more. I thought it was very well done. It wasn't quite as much to my personal taste. But last night I was really surprised by the romantic comedy Love at First Sight. Haley Lou Richardson is a main character there. Jamila Jamil plays the narrator character. It is a love story about two 20-somethings who have a chance encounter meeting on a plane to London and then end up getting together, kind of playing out. She's going for a wedding, he's going for another gathering, and they end up connecting throughout the day. It takes place over the course of kind of one day. If you're looking for a little streaming date night movie, you could do a lot worse than Love at First Sight. I thought it was pretty charming. I thought the leads were charming, and the story just worked for me. On Prime Video, we have A Million Miles, which features Michael Pena in a story as an immigrant who works his way up to becoming a NASA astronaut. Kind of a feel-good story. Well worth checking out if you're looking for kind of a uplifting drama. Pena is good in that. Rosa Salazar is also good in that. On the small screen, we are getting close to the finale of Ahsoka, the new Star Wars Universe series from Dave Filoni. This one probably a little bit more insider than some of the previous series. If you haven't seen things like Clone Wars or Star Wars Rebels, I have not seen all of those, and I'll have to say I'm still really enjoying it. They've had some great action set pieces. I really liked some of the battles in episode 4. Episode 5 actually got a little bit of a theatrical run. There are some beautiful things in there with scope. We had Hayden Christensen back as Anakin Skywalker in pieces there, but Rosario Dawson has been great in the lead role as Ahsoka Tano. I'm very excited to see where it ends up. So be looking for that on Tuesday when the finale should drop. But that's it for the Hollywood Corner. I hope you guys all have a wonderful and a successful week 2, both in fantasy and in your rooting interests. And please, Broncos, no more of these 1-point losses at the end. It's just getting harder to take. But that'll do it for week 2. I'll see you guys next week for another preview of week 3.